Colossus is the most advanced lineup optimizer in daily fantasy sports. Lock and exclude players. Adjust player exposure to reduce risk of injury or poor performance. Customize individual projections or upload your own projections. Generate hundreds of optimal lineups in seconds. Name and save the best lineups. Create winning lineups for the top sites like DraftKings and FanDuel for free at dailyfantasycafe.com.
Hello and welcome to the FanDuel Punch-Out. I'm Big Italy 42 here talking about big slate of action on Friday again, and we don't have a whole lot of Fridays left of baseball season, so this is one of the better ones I've seen recently. Great spots. We got a Coors Field game if you're into that. Maybe if you're not into that, there's plenty of other great options. Lots of good aces on the mound and a couple facing off against each other too, so might see some low ownership on some of these guys that are in pretty good spots. So let's go ahead and get into it here, talking about pitchers. And as we're looking at expensive pitchers, we got three of them. We got Madison Bumgarner at home against Arizona. He comes in as a minus 220 favorite, biggest on the night, 6.5 run total. He's got to be your best play, your top play. If you ask me, that's the guy I'll be paying for if I'm paying up. Obviously, huge ballpark. Arizona, a team that's better at home than they are on the road. Right behind him, $12,500 Chris Sale, facing off against the Indians, who he fared well against as far as, what you expect from most pitchers, but what you expect out of Chris Sale is more than he gave you last time. But a lot of that due to the fact that Ryan Rayburn took him deep twice. So you obviously aren't expecting Ryan Rayburn to take him deep twice. I'm pretty sure I saw a stat that was the only time that anyone's hit 2 home runs off Chris Sale since Adam Rosales did it. So I think those are the only 2. Don't quote me on that. But either way, it hasn't happened very many times. So Chris Sale, good spot. Obviously, better park factors for him in Cleveland than they are at U.S. Cellular in Chicago. So that's a fine spot for him. Another guy in a great spot, Zach Greinke, $12,200 at home against Pittsburgh. Another guy that's a big favorite, minus 200, 6.5 run total there. So very similar to Madison Bumgarner. And then next up, we got 2 other aces, Max Scherzer versus Jose Fernandez. Scherzer coming off one of his better performances recently. I mean, he's been good, but he hasn't been the Max Scherzer that we all know and love. And he's facing off against Jose Fernandez, who has been absolutely phenomenal. He's a guy that obviously we like better at home than on the road, but this is a guy that, despite not having much of an offense behind him, he's got incredible numbers this year, despite coming off an injury, missing part of the season, of course. But on the season, 31.9% strikeout rate, 0.19 home runs per 9, which would easily be the best in all of baseball if he were qualified. Obviously, nowhere near qualified. He's only pitched 48 innings, but strikeout or swing strike rate of almost 14%, hard hit rate 31% isn't great, but 2.44 xFIP, actually better than Chris Sale and better than everyone else on this slate. One of the best in all of baseball there. So this is a guy that I think if I'm playing one of these 2 sides, I'm going to be going towards Fernandez because he's going to be lower owned. Yes, it's a tougher matchup against Washington as opposed to Max Scherzer on the other side against the Marlins, but Fernandez has looked great, and it's not to say that Scherzer isn't great, but he hasn't shown a lot of upside recently, and obviously you get lower ownership with Fernandez. Don't think you can go wrong with either one, but neither one a cash game play for me since they're facing each other, and a lot of other great options. Other guys you can consider as far as pitchers go, Justin Verlander's an interesting one. There's a couple guys here that have BVP against him, and he's pitched fairly well against them recently. Last time out, 12.66 points at Kansas City 3 starts ago. He's $8,800. I don't think he'll have much ownership. I don't think any of these non-aces, well, pseudo-aces, guys that used to be aces like Verlander, are going to have a whole lot of ownership tonight. So I think that Verlander is a guy that will fly under the radar. I'm not expecting this guy to go out and dominate 18, 20 fantasy points, but if he gets you 13 to 14, gets you the win. He is facing off against Johnny Cueto, but Johnny Cueto has been awful recently, so maybe Detroit gets to him. Hard to say there, but either way, $8,800, I think he's an interesting option. Single bullet GPP type. And then as you look down cheaper, there's not a whole lot of guys that stand out. Marcus Stroman's a guy that maybe you would consider in a better matchup, but only pitched 5 innings in his return. He's a guy that's got great stuff, but big total in this game. That's a pass for me. Next guy I'm looking at, though, is Drew Smyly. $7,700 coming off an impressive performance against Boston. 11 strikeouts over 6 innings, got 17 points. And last time he faced this team, all he did was go 7 innings, 10 strikeouts, shutout, or 7 shutout innings, I should say. Got the win, 21 FanDuel points. It's a Baltimore team that strikes out a ton against left-handed pitching, and they have some guys that individually hit lefties well, but as a team they do not. and they strike out quite a bit. So 7,700, that's the guy I'll be reaching down for if I'm paying down. But more than likely, I'm sticking with the top. Obviously, if you're going to be wanting to get a bunch of Coors Field bats, you're going to have to go down to somebody here. So I think that's a viable option. And then all the way down at the bottom, if you're just going to be stacking, a guy that's got great stuff, but he's making his first start for the Reds, it's Brandon Finnegan. And he was not very good in AAA, though. He's at a 6.23 ERA, 1.6 whip. And he's not going to have much of a pitch count here. He's not a guy that's going to pitch deep. But if he can get you some strikeouts, maybe he goes 5 innings if you're lucky. I mean, these other options here are really guys that you just don't like. I mean, Zach Davies had one good performance. It was against Miami. Didn't fare well in his 2 other starts, both against Pittsburgh. So if you're really looking for a cheap guy, you have to have someone. I mean, it's slim pickings down there. You got Jeff Locke, $6,000. He's been decent over his last 2 starts, but not a guy that I have any sort of faith in. I suppose that's the guy you would go with down there, cheap. But for me, it's Smiley. Anybody past that is, I mean, the ultimate GPP play. You're just hoping you catch lightning in a bottle so you can fit a bunch of big bats. But I think tonight's the night where take advantage of a couple values, get the bats that you feel the best about. I'm really not going to be paying down a pitcher. Just trying to look for an option down there, but certainly don't feel good about anybody past Drew Smiley there. Catcher options, you get Buster Posey at home against Ruby De La Rosa. We know De La Rosa, significant splits, much better against righties than lefties, but Posey at home against a pitcher that's not been in particularly good form. I think that's a good spot for Posey at $3,500. If you're looking for guys in the San Diego, Colorado, Coors Field game, Derek Norris still hasn't returned to the lineup, but if he's back, of course, you like him at $3,400. Then it's a mess after that. I mean, you got Austin Hedges. You assume he would be in the lineup. Dustin Garneau probably will be in the lineup, I'm guessing, with McHenry and Hundley both on the DL. I mean, you've got other options there, I guess. We've got Tom Murphy as an option who might start, but he really hasn't had many opportunities, nor has he done much either. So I'll probably be avoiding the Colorado game for catchers. And just go ahead and stick with John Jaso once again. I mean, he's minimum salary, homered last night. Not a guy with a ton of upside power-wise, but certainly a guy that can be your chalk cash game play once again. He makes a lot of sense tonight. Sal Perez, as we know, significant BVP against Justin Verlander. Seems like he does well against him each time out. So $2,300 for him. If you're a BVP believer, I think that's a fine swerve off of Jaso. Outside of that, Evan Gaddis and Russell Martin are the other 2 guys I'm looking at here. Lots of options at all these positions, as you can tell, with not that many. I mean, there's elite pitchers, and then there's everyone else. So I'm definitely looking to pick on some of these bad pitchers. First base is absolutely loaded. I mean, I could go on all day about these guys. I'll try to highlight some of my favorites, though. Evan Encarnacion, hard not to like him at home against Rick Porcello, who has just not been a great pitcher this year. And Evan Encarnacion, really, I'm not saying he's getting on one of those streaks necessarily, but we know this guy, once he gets it going, he could put up points in a hurry. Homered again last night. Great spot for him. Joey Votto gets Kyle Davies, who has not been very good. We know Votto's great cash game play, but you're not paying $5K for your cash game first baseman today. Other guys to look at, of course, David Ortiz in that big total at Toronto. A great spot. Jose Abreu, $4,500 against Cody Anderson is a nice spot. If you're not a believer in Johnny Cueto, Miguel Cabrera, who also has been pretty terrible recently, is $3,800, cheapest I've ever seen him on FanDuel as far as I can remember. But likely, if you're going to pay down at first base, you're going with a guy at Coors Field, which is probably going to be a Justin Morneau at $3,800. That's the guy I would likely be going with. Another guy who's been really hot, Prince Fielder, $3,500. His price keeps rising. He's in a great spot. And if you're going to go for the significant splits, Brandon Belt's your play at $3,200 against Ruby De La Rosa. 409 WOBA allowed to lefties. I think Brandon Belt's a great cash game play at $3,200. If you can't reach for the others. If for some reason Paulson is in the lineup instead of Morneau, or maybe he's in the outfield, whatever it may be, at $3K he's a fine option also. And then when you scroll down just a little bit more, there's not much that stands out, but you got guys like Justin Smoke, Adrian Gonzalez, both those guys fine GPP options down there. Second base, there's a couple guys up top that I really like. Jose Altuve at $3,500, not quite even close to that top spot, but facing off against lefty and Felix Doubront, who has really struggled against right-handed batters this year, 357 WOBA allowed. You know the drill by now with Jose Altuve and how well he hits lefties, so he's in a great spot there. Dustin Pedroia showing some power recently. Now he gets the Rogers Center. This guy's got 3 home runs in his last 4 games, and he also has 9 hits over that span and 2 doubles. So this is a guy that's absolutely locked in. If if I'm not going Altuve, I think Pedroia is probably the way that you want to go here. Other options, Jed Jerko in Coors Field, $2,700, one of the cheaper plays that actually has some upside there at Coors Field. You got DJ LeMahieu with $3,500 against Kennedy. It's okay. Kennedy has pitched well recently. I don't like paying that type of price tag for LeMahieu. I mean, he's the guy that just doesn't have a lot of upside, but he's a fine filler. I mean, he's got a nice floor in this matchup, considering it where it is, but that's about it there. And then the last guys I'm looking at, Brian Dozier gets another lefty, and Andrew Heaney, he's $2,800, and then below him, Brock Holt at $2,500 in that big game in Toronto if he's in the lineup tonight. Third base options, you got Nolan Arenado, of course, at home against a righty, and Ian Kennedy, has had some issues with the long ball this year, as we know. 1.72 home runs per 9 is, I'm being kind by saying some issues. I mean, those numbers are very bad, and he's in a pretty good spot there. So other guys, Miguel Sano gets another lefty at $4,300. Of course, Donaldson's an option, but at $52, I mean, you can get a Coors Field bat for cheaper. It's got just as much upside, if you ask me, in Nolan Arenado. Other options down cheaper, Adrian Beltre sticks out to me as a great cash game play. Excuse me, $3,000 against James Paxton. Not only has Beltre been locked in, but he gets a lefty. He's smashed lefties throughout his career. This guy's on a great run right now, so definitely looking at him. Travis Shaw, another one of those guys that kind of flies under the radar, and he's $2,900 at the Rogers Center. Nice big total there if you're not looking to pick on the Coors Field game there. $2,800 Todd Frazier is not a bad option either. Had a couple of nice games in a row. I know he's burned everyone about 1,000,000 times in the second half here, but certainly a guy you need to keep on your radar. And then Trevor Plouffe at $2,800, also against the lefty and Heaney. Not a bad option there either. Shortstop options, you got Jose Reyes at Coors Field at $4,000. Lindor, unfortunately, facing Chris Sale. That's a no thanks for me. You can target that in a GBP if you'd like, but no thanks. Carlos Correa is $3,600. He gets the lefty, and Dubron already mentioned his struggles against righties, so that's a great spot for him. Xander Bogaerts, another great option for you at the Rogers Center for $3,600. And then if you're paying down, if this guy's in the lineup, he's probably my favorite play, price considered. Brandon Crawford, $2,300. They're saying that it's possible. They had an off day yesterday. It's possible he returns today. If he does, $2,300 for a lefty with power against one of the worst pitchers in baseball, against left-handed batters. Sign me up for that. If not him, Freddie Galvis in a good spot. $2,200 facing off against Williams Perez, who is god-awful against lefties. $385 WOBA allowed. I think that's a great spot if you're punting, if you're not paying up for those other guys. Outfield options, there are a lot. Can't give you the whole list, or else I'll be here all day. But I'll give you my favorite plays here. If you're paying up, it makes sense for it to be a guy like Jose Bautista at home at the Rogers Center against Rick Porcello. If not him, then you're looking at Coors Field bats, but you got a couple question marks. Justin Upton, Carlos Gonzalez, both guys listed day-to-day right now. Either guy is a great option if they're in the lineup. Same goes for the rest. Matt Kemp, Will Myers, Charlie Blackmon. All these guys are great plays if you're going to pay up. I think if you're going to pick one of the guys that you're paying up for, assuming that he's in the lineup, for me it's probably going to be Matt Kemp or Justin Upton. Obviously, Ian Kennedy a much better pitcher than Chad Bettis is, so if I have to only pay for one Coors bet, it's probably going to be on the Padres side. But I don't mind Charlie Blackmon at $4,400. Nice cash game play. We've seen Kennedy struggle more with lefties than righties this year as well. And then now we get to the elite plays that are just way too cheap. You get Nelson Cruz in Texas at $4,000. Yes, it's a righty, Giovanni Gallardo, but it's also a righty who has just not been very good at all over the past month. Just a 13% strikeout rate, 4.6 swing strike rate. So this guy's not missing any bats. Nelson Cruz, once that ball hits his bat, it travels a very long way. And then Mike Trout's reward for hitting 2 home runs last night, 5 RBIs, 3 walks, was a price drop, and I'm absolutely baffled by this. Had pretty high ownership last night, $3,800 tonight. You need this guy more than you need Coors Field bats, if you ask me, at this price. It's a fine spot for him as well, facing off against Mike Pelfrey, who, despite being one of the leaders in all of baseball in home runs per 9, it's not a good matchup for him against Mike Trout. And Mike Trout obviously locked in. Hit a grand slam, then homered in the very next inning last night. Incredible spot there. Couple tournament options. I like Curtis Granderson. He's been hitting well against Masahiro Tanaka, who, as we know, very good pitcher. But Tanaka, at times, has had issues with lefties. 280 WOBA is good, but he has allowed 10 home runs. So, we've seen Granderson many times get to a pitcher very early, so I think that's a fine spot for him. And then now we're looking at some values. Ben Revere going to be popular once again, $3,000. I like Seth Smith coming in at $2,500. And then, as you know, my favorite platoon player, Chris Young, gets a lefty, and Steven Matz. Matz has pitched well, but $2,800 Chris Young, batting, I'm guessing, second or fifth tonight. I'm absolutely in love with that. A couple more guys. If Scott Van Slyke's back in, he's near minimum salary. He's got some big-time upside there. Darnell Sweeney is minimum salary. Switch hitter against Williams Perez. You want to be targeting Perez with any lefty that you can from the Phillies. That's obviously a fine spot there. And then Odubel Herrera is another guy, lefty against Perez, who's he's a speed and upside type of guy, so you don't mind looking that way a little bit as well. Cody Ash, a guy you can consider also. He's hit a couple homers recently. If you just need a bare minimum punt, it's in a good spot. And then you got Adam Jones and Steve Pearce facing off against the lefty. It is Drew Smiley, who has pitched well, but you always got to consider these guys, especially at their discounted price tags against lefties. That is going to wrap things up. Find us on Twitter at DF Cafe. Subscribe to this YouTube channel. I'm at Big Italy 42. We got lots of great NFL content, college football content, lots of other great things to help you out, help you win this week in DFS, and we'll see you guys next time.